Hello, Honors Bio students. We are going to be looking at our cell metabolism next. And I want to start off with ATP. Now, we've talked about this molecule for a couple of units now. This mysterious ATP molecule. What in the world is it? So we're going to start off by describing it and what it does, and then I'll give you a little introduction to photosynthesis. Not a huge amount, just to get us started and hit the ground running on Thursday. Now, by the end of this video, you should be able to explain the structure of ATP, the three parts of it. You should be able to explain how it provides energy for cells and cell activities. And you should also be able to label the chloroplast, the parts of the chloroplast, and the beginnings of the photosynthetic pathways. So let's go ahead and get started. ATP, like I said, we've been talking about this throughout the cell unit. We talked about the mitochondria and providing ATP, and the chloroplast is going to be involved in this as well. So what in the world is ATP? Well, ATP is called is just a set of initials for adenosine triphosphate. So let me go ahead and clean that up. That's a phosphate. Now, over here on the left, we have the picture of adenosine triphosphate. Now, if you picked up the notes from school, you have this picture, you can label it. The top part in orange is the adenosine. That's where that comes from. So that's adenosine. Don't worry about what it is. You just have to kind of look at that and be able to say, that's the adenosine part. It is you're going to see this a little bit again in DNA. We'll see a related molecule of it. Down here, this should be a little bit more recognizable. This is a sugar. It's a 5-carbon sugar. And the one part that we want to really look at are these phosphate groups. So we have the first phosphate, the second, and then we have the third. Now, there's something that I hope you notice about these. These are filled with oxygen molecules. And oxygen, if you remember back when we did polarity, oxygen, I drew my little picture of the big guy. And that means he is electronegative, meaning he tends to hog the electrons. So imagine, not only do you have one of these guys, but you would have another one here and 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 here. And not only that, but some of them are not only carrying partial charges, we've got all of these negative charges together. And I'm hoping you remember back in your physical science days that negative charges don't tend to go well with other negative charges. They repel. So imagine trying to hold all of these negative charges. It would be like you compressing a spring, and you're holding the spring down. So this really tightly coiled spring, and imagine, you know that if you're holding the spring down, if you let it go, you intuitively understand that, well, that spring is going to expand. And I want you to think like that with ATP. We've got all of these negative charges crammed together, all of these oxygen molecules crammed together. And this gives this molecule an instability. It's very unstable, and it takes energy in holding these phosphate molecules together in bonds. So because of that, that means this little molecule holds a little bundle of energy, and it can transfer that energy. So just like a spring, like if you were to give that spring to somebody else to hold, they would have that little bundle of energy, that little coil that they now have in it. And so that's what we see with the adenosine triphosphate. Now, how important is this molecule? Well, let me give you some numbers. Now, this is not perfectly exact, but it has been estimated that if we were to take the amount of ATP at one instant in your body, like right now, if we were to measure how much ATP is in your body, we might only get 5 grams of ATP. Now, you remember with the potato lab, the slices of potato were around 11 grams. So you can see that's not a lot. However, if they measure the amount of ATP over the course of a day, it's been estimated that you would have your own body's mass of ATP. So the average student, let's say 120 pounds, and we could convert that to kilograms if we wanted to, but that amount of ATP in one day. So that's, just compare that, half of that potato slice to your own body weight, and that'll give you an idea of how much we use in a day. So how in the world does this even happen? Well, the ATP molecules, and forevermore, you're probably going to see it as more of the ATP, the 3-phosphates, and then this just gets symbolized. In fact, some books, your book does this as well, just does this, the adenosine, and then the triphosphate. And so what will happen is, remember, this is like a coiled spring. So if you break this bond, you've released that energy. So what happens is we go from adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate. And here we go, an adenosine diphosphate. For 2-phosphates. Now, this now has lower energy, and because it's broken, you've released that energy. So we're releasing that energy much like releasing that compressed spring. Now, how do we see this in the body? Well, if you have, let's going to go back to this picture up here. If you have ATP, and let's say we have glucose, pardon me, if that ATP gives that phosphate to that glucose, we call it phosphorylated because it now has a phosphate. That phosphorylated glucose has just a little bit more energy to it, just a little bit, but enough. It's you've excited it a little bit. You've given it a little bit of energy. So anytime molecules need kind of a boost in any direction, we will use that. Now, so why is this so important? Well, what our body is going to do is convert the energy in carbohydrates and lipids. And carbohydrates and lipids, I kind of mentioned this before, but let's go over it again. They're valuable. Nobody would ever dispute that. Your body loves carbs and loves lipids. They're great sources of energy. But they're big sources of energy. It's like having a $500 bill in your wallet. It's very valuable, not very useful. And so you've got this huge packet of energy. And what your body's going to do is it's going to break down the carbohydrates and lipids in such a way to add the energy to adenosine diphosphate. So what you're going to see in the bottom of this, you're going to take adenosine diphosphate and phosphate, and just like you squeezing that spring, you've got to add energy. You got to put energy in to coil that spring back up again. You're going to add energy to boost this up to ATP. And now we've got a nice little molecule to do that. And then what the cell does is it can use that ATP for cellular work. So we kind of consider this energy currency. And that energy currency is going to be helpful for doing cellular work. And so when you're building proteins for muscle, when you're transporting, active transport, ATP is going to be needed. And so as the ATP then gets broken down, you release the phosphate, and you now have adenosine diphosphate, and you've released just a little bit of energy here. And that little bit of energy is going to be enough to do that cellular work. Very important job there. Now, what your body does is it uses these reactions back and forth. Plants do this as well. They couple reactions. They combine. So imagine, here's a little picture that might be helpful to you. Imagine that we have 2 buckets. That's not a very good picture of 2 buckets, but we'll go with that. And I want to lift this bucket that has rocks in it. And we've got a little pulley system up here. And I know it's going to take energy to raise this up. But what I could think is, okay, well, if I add water or other things to this bucket, now that bucket is going to then come down, and then I'm going to raise that up. So you want to think about your body and plants and amoebas and bacteria. They use energy releasing reactions to power energy demanding reactions. And in that way, you're going to be able to do useful work in your body. Now you might ask, well, gosh, why can't we do this in a seemingly more efficient manner? Well, you got to remember, energy is neither created nor destroyed. We've got to get that energy from somewhere, and that somewhere is going to be in the bonds of these molecules. Or in the case of plants, they can get the energy from sunlight, which we'll talk about. So what we're going to look at are two reactions. We're going to look at cell respiration. Cell respiration is going to take glucose, and you want to make sure you jot these equations down, glucose, and it's going to use oxygen. And basically this is a slow burning, and ultimately you should get carbon dioxide, water, and then you're also going to get a boatload of ATP. Now this is not balanced. You can test me. You can see if you can check it and make sure it is. If I do a real quick check, that should do it. And then and now cell respiration is energy releasing. And then photosynthesis, the equation is going to look like it's the exact opposite. It's not the exact opposite in terms of what happens, but the products and reactants are essentially reversed. So in photosynthesis, you're going to take carbon dioxide and water, and in the you're going to produce glucose and oxygen. Now this happens because it's going to tap into light energy, and you're going to be able to see that happening. And this is an energy consuming. It's going to take energy to have this happen. So that's what you're going to notice in the next couple of days. We're going to look at photosynthesis. And it's going to be a little bit complicated, but I want you, this is going to be a strange way to end this, but I want you to think of a dam that is used for power. And so this is going to be weird. I'm going to ask you to do something that doesn't necessarily make sense, but I promise you it will. Trust me. I want you to draw like a cross section of the dam in your notes. And I want you to be thinking about this. You've got a lot of water on one side, not a lot of water on the other side. If I were to poke a hole through this dam, it would be completely right for you to say, of course water is going to come out of that, because you would tell me that water, there's a lot of energy stored in this water. And in fact, most of you have learned in the past that if you put a little turbine in this little pipe, it's much more complex than that, but again, keep this in mind. We can use that power of the water to generate electricity. And of course, for a lot of us, that's how and a lot of the eastern United States, we get our power from hydroelectric dams. So I want to leave you with that. That's kind of a weird picture, but trust me, it's going to make a lot of sense. And so if you draw that, and don't skimp, don't draw this little teeny tiny little dam, use a nice 30-year paper to draw this. We're going to make sense of it in a couple of days. So well, I hope that helps get you started, and I hope you took some good notes. You can always rewatch it. Thank you.